All right, guys, I've basically finished the physical build of the QAVR, and I thought I would take you through what I do as my kind of final software check to make sure that I am ready for flight and maiden here in Cleanflight. So the first thing I want to do is, I don't fly in auto level modes, but I do want to calibrate the accelerometer. I'm a little surprised that why isn't it moving? Oh, yeah, of course. I've disabled it so I can get 2 kilohertz mode. Ha ha ha. So, no need to calibrate the accelerometer because it's turned off. Now, I normally have my accelerometer turned off on my F1 board because that's necessary to really get down to 1,000 loop time. Well, it's not necessary, but if you want to do black box logging at 1:1, it is necessary. Anyway, on an F3 board, I thought, oh, well, surely I'll just leave it turned on. But no, I want to try this hot new 2 kilohertz mode out, right? So, okay, so forget the accelerometer, but if you did have the accelerometer on, you'd want to go ahead and put the copter flat on the desk and calibrate it. And the main reason for that is, even if you're not going to fly in auto level mode, if you're going to fly in auto level mode, you're going to need to do in-flight calibration of the accelerometer anyway, or you're going to need to use accelerometer trim on the ground, whether you do that in flight or not. But the big reason that you want to calibrate your accelerometer, and you need to do this sometimes every time you upload new firmware, is that the small angle detection will prevent the copter from arming if it is more than, I think it's 25 degrees off horizontal by default. And so sometimes the accelerometer will be out of calibration when you first install new firmware, or when you get a new board and you'll go set the copter down to maiden and it won't arm. You're like, why won't it arm? Everything is right. And that's why. So if you ever have a copter that just randomly won't arm and you can't figure out why, do an accelerometer calibration. You can do that in the field using the stick command, or you can do that on the bench using a laptop with USB. Okay, so no need to do that though because I've got it disabled. Fine. Also, hey, let me point this out to you. When you've got the accelerometer disabled, ACC_hardware equals 1, the gyro also shows up as disabled. That's not, the gyro is not disabled. Some people get confused by that. The gyro is working. If the gyro weren't working, nothing would work. It wouldn't fly. So just don't worry about the fact that the gyro is grayed out. In my ports configuration, I'll just let you have a quick look here. The VCP port has MSP on it. And I don't know why you would really put anything else on the VCP port. I suppose in theory, if you had the right software, you could put blackbox on the VCP and you could log from blackbox to your PC via the USB connector. Like you could imagine a scenario where you'd want to do that, but you would need to have the software to do it. And as far as I know, that doesn't exist. So basically, VCP is always going to have MSP on it so you can run the configurator, and that's going to be it. And then we have 3 UARTs to work with. UART1, my understanding is that when you use the RX pad on the Lux, UART for serial, UART1 is what's bridged over there. So if you're going to use the jumper on the bottom of the board to do a serial RX, and then you're going to use the RX pad, then you need to use serial RX on UART1, okay? And then UART1 is taken up. You might think that because the UART1 pad is free on the board, that you could put something on it. But no, it's being used by the receiver, okay, even though you're not technically using that pad. And I think the advantage of the RX pad on the Lux is that it's actually powered, the 5 volt or 3.3 volt, if that's what you're using. That power pad next to the RX pad on the Lux is powered by USB, so you can plug in USB and still do your receiver checks without having to plug a flight battery in. Okay, so if you are using a PPM receiver, then UART1 is free, and you can use that for whatever you like. But if you're using a serial receiver and you're plugged into the RX pad on the Lux, then UART1 needs to be serial RX. At least that's my understanding, and that's the way I have it configured now, and it is in fact working, so I think that's correct. Now I'm using UART2 to do smart port telemetry to my Tyrannus, and I'm using UART3 to do black box at 250K baud. Okay, great. So that's all correct. And I can go, now in configuration, let's go there next. In configuration, I've got serial receiver and S-bus. Sometimes people have trouble with this resetting itself. If you go to the ports tab, if you go to the configuration tab, you have to do this in the correct order. You need to enable the serial receiver and set the serial provider. And then once you've done that, you can go to the ports tab and choose which port is going to have serial on it. If you try and enable serial RX here without choosing RX serial here, it'll just reset. So if you find, the short version of the story is that if you find that these options are resetting, just keep working your way through them in different orders until you find one that sticks, okay? So you got to save this and then go to ports and set the serial port. I have min command set to 1,000, max throttle set to 2,000, and I have not yet configured min throttle. I'm going to do that in this period. I've got my vbat monitoring. Now I have not configured, I haven't got my flight battery set yet, so I haven't done that yet. And I also have not yet configured my voltage scale to be correct. So we'll have to take care of that when we get the flight battery plugged in. I've got telemetry and blackbox enabled. In Failsafe, I have Failsafe enabled, and I have Failsafe throttle set to 1,000. In other words, I want Failsafe to stop the motors. The other thing I've done for Failsafe, hang on, is here in the CLI, I'm going to issue the RxFail command. I prefer, now the default is for RxFail for channel 0, 1, 2, 3. That's your by default, your four major control channels: throttle, aileron, elevator, and yaw, rudder, whatever. It's set to auto, and I don't like that. It will set them to middle. In other words, for the throttle, it'll go to 0, and for the other channels, it'll go to center stick. And I don't want that. I want my RxFail to hold last position. And so, in other words, if I'm turning left, I don't want it to glitch. And I don't want it to stutter if I have a little bit of a dropout. And it's important that if you do that, you need to configure these settings correctly as well. And the really important one is failsafe delay here. So if you watch my video on failsafe, which I certainly recommend that you do, you'll know that failsafe delay determines how long the RxFail settings are in effect before then the failsafe setting takes over, okay? So here, failsafe delay is set to 5, which is a half a second. And what that means is that after half a second, the failsafe setting will kick in and the motors will stop, right? So what I want to do is, if I have a dropout of up to 1/2 a second, I want the copter to keep doing whatever it was doing in the last minute. And then after half a second, it's going to just stop the motors. Now, you may not prefer to do it that way. For example, if I'm in a hard roll, if I'm doing a full throttle deflection aileron roll and I have a dropout, it's going to keep doing that for a half a second, and that's going to be pretty disastrous because you could do a lot of flips and rolls in a half a second before the copter shuts down. On the other hand, if I had the default settings and it was auto, it would immediately stop rolling, and who knows what else it would do. The throttle would go to low, and all the other channels would stop. So it's your decision how you want to set this. Maybe I would want to set a failsafe delay of maybe 0.2 of a second, and to give myself a little bit less of a margin. Part of the reason I don't feel too worried about this is that the FreeSky protocol and the X4R and the D4R receivers, they are really bulletproof, especially at the ranges that I'm typically flying when I'm flying FPV. At FPV ranges, you're seldom more than 300 or 400 meters out, especially if you're flying in trees. If you're flying in clear space, as opposed to proximity, you may be as much as 1 kilometer out, but typically more like 600 meters. With a 600 milliwatt transmitter, I've gotten a little further than that, maybe as much as 800 meters or 1 kilometer. But the FreeSky control link has so much more range than the video link that I've just literally never had a dropout. I've never even gotten an RSSI warning. I'm not kidding you. I've never even gotten an RSSI warning when I'm flying FPV. So I feel like if there's a little bit of a risk that I'm going to go hard into the ground and the motors might spin for up to half a second, I feel like that's an acceptable risk, because most of the time if I have a dropout. I'm probably not going to be doing anything too radical, and if there's just a tiny bit of dropout, I'd rather the copter just keep doing what it was doing as if there wasn't a dropout, and that way when it comes back, it'll be relatively smooth. Anyway, that's my thinking about it. Definitely do your own research because your failsafe configuration is critical. Okay, let's go now to the receiver tab. Hang on, we're going to reboot and reconnect here. Let's go down to the receiver tab. And I'm going to power my transmitter on. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm just going to check my channels, and they should go 1000 to 2000, okay, with 1500 as the center. 1000 to 2000, all right. 1000 to 2000, 1000 to 2000. Okay, we're all good here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check my modes tab and make sure that my modes are correct. Now I have air mode configured on 100% of the time. And I'm going to check my arming. Arming is good. And I'm going to check my beeper, although that's hardly flight critical. Okay, beeper's looking good too. Okay, so my modes are all correct. Good to go there. Now that that's all done, it is time to connect a flight battery. It is a good idea to always check for continuity between ground and the positive pin before you plug in your battery during a build. And I've already done this. I'm not going to do it now. You can also use a current limiting device like a automotive light bulb. I have a video on my channel about how to build one of those. This is a good idea because if you have accidentally shorted something in your build, then you're going to get some smoke coming out, and that's not good. Let's go ahead and plug in. Okay, so now we'll check our battery voltage. Let's calibrate that for 16.61, which is what my multimeter reads. 16.8. Okay, so I'm going to go to the configuration tab, and I'm going to go to the voltage scale, and you probably will not have to turn it down by much. I'm going to save and reboot. Let's turn on auto connect and see if that helps us out a little there. 16.4. Okay, see, that was a little too much. Let's just go up by 1. And that should put us right in the ballpark. There we go. 16.5. All right, we'll call that good. How close do we need to be? All right, so that's done. And then, now let's calibrate the ESCs. So we're going to go to the motors tab. Props are off. Props are off. Critical. Props are off. I know not everybody likes to calibrate the ESCs. I do. So we're going to go and we're going to turn up the master slider to max. There we go. Calibrated. Good. And let's see. Next, we're going to need to set min throttle. So we'll go right here. We'll stay right here. We'll plug back in. And we'll start to work this slider up until the motors spin. Okay, so 1063 is where they are all reliably spinning. So I'm going to go 1063, let's say 1065, 75, 85. I'm going to add about 20 to it. We'll say 1085 is where we're going to set min throttle. I use the same rates on every build because I want if I were to build a camera platform, I probably wouldn't use the same rates. But all of my racing/acro builds, I use the same rates and I stick with the same PID controller. And I find that the PID values vary between the builds, but the rates, if I keep these rates consistent, then the copter flies how I expect it to fly. Except I don't want any throttle expo. I thought I fixed that. I'm going to 0 throttle expo because I find that with different props, I have different hover points. And so if I just keep a linear throttle curve, I don't have to constantly keep adjusting the midpoint for the new hover point. So I wasn't using very much expo to begin with. Now I have 0 expo. But I keep the RC rates and the RC expo, the yaw expo, and the RC rates, keep all of that stuff the same across all my builds, then it means that the copter flies about how I expect it to all the time. So that's done. You know, obviously before I got here, I configured my map, you know, all this basic stuff. But what I wanted to walk you through on this video is just the last checks and the last configuration I do after I finish a build before I get ready to go out and maiden. Oh, hey, oh my goodness, there's one more critical thing I need to do, and that's test my failsafe. So let's plug in, let's arm, let's throttle up, and receiver off. Great. Everything shut down. That's what I want. Okay, never maiden without testing your failsafe. Critical. Okay, guys, we're ready to go maiden. I am not. I know you guys are anxious to see flight video of this copter. I still got a lot of tuning to do before I feel like showing you any video, because I hate to show it off when it's not in good trim. So keep waiting. I will get you some flight video. I'm sure I'm as anxious as you are, but no flight video today. Hope this was helpful. Happy flying.